All right, guys, so continuing on day one, this is not day three, this is day one. Day one is right. So we're going to talk about rotations. Rotations are really just turning your image, whatever it is, and then rotating it in a 90-degree way around this origin. So from the origin point, which is 0, 0, we're just rotating it 90 degrees and seeing where it ends up. So when you make a rotation, these are like the algebraic notations of how these rotations take place. So I'm going to give you an actual point because it just makes more sense if you have numbers to look at instead of just these letters. So if we take the point, let's say 4, 1 right here, and I'm going to write a 4 and a 1 instead of an X and a Y, and I was to rotate it 90 degrees, what happens is, or what this means right here, is that for every -90-degree rotation, that's what that little symbol means, we're going to flip the X and the Y, flip X and Y, and then obey the quadrant sign. So what I mean by quadrant is each of these little boxes here on your graph have a quadrant number. So this is quadrant, let's go with a different color. So this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is 3, and this is 4. And they rotate in a counterclockwise direction. So anytime we talk about a rotation, if it's not mentioned in what direction you're going, you're always going to go counterclockwise, meaning the opposite way that the hands would turn on a clock. So if you go 90-degree rotation from quadrant 1, this little point is going to end up in quadrant 2. If you were to go a 180 degree, then that point right there at 4, 1, 180 degrees would go to this quadrant, which is quadrant 3. Same thing here. If we started off with that point at 4, 1, 270-degree rotation would go from quadrant 1 all the way around to quadrant 4. All right, so let's look at what happens to the numbers. So if we rotate 90 degrees, so for every 90-degree rotation, we're going to flip X and Y. So we're going to flip these coordinates. So it's now going to be a 1 and a 4. And then we're going to obey the quadrant sign. So we want to think about what the signs look like in this quadrant. So in this quadrant, quadrant 2, are your X's positive or negative? Well, your X's are all negative. And then your Y's in this quadrant are all positive because they're above the X axis on the graph. So your Y's are positive. So that means that any point in this quadrant needs to have a negative X value and a positive Y value. So we're going to make the -1 because that's our X coordinate now, and then our Y stays positive. So that new point would be at -1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Right there. And this is called patty paper. It's really helpful when you're doing rotations, when trying to get the hang of things. So I'm going to draw in these axes so you can see that 90-degree rotation. So we're rotating from the origin, so I'm going to hold the paper down at that 0, 0 point, and then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So when I rotate it, those axes are going to line back up. So it's going to line back up right there. You can see that the point is on top of the one that we drew in. So that's that 90-degree rotation. And there's some of this paper in a little blue box up at the desk when you come in where you got your worksheets. All right, so let's do an example here. So we're going to start off with our image. So let's flip over to a lighter blue so that I can draw this out for y'all. So our pre-image, which is the original, this is going to be the one that I graph in this color blue. So we're going to start off and graph all these points. So we're going to go to -6, 2, -6, 4, negative 4, 4, negative 4, 5, negative 3, 3, negative 4, 1, and negative 4, 2. And then you want to connect those dots in this order. So we're going to start with that first dot that we placed, go to the next second dot, and then over to the third, and so on. So you should, well, that's kind of funky, but right there. So you should end up with this arrow looking image for your pre-image or your original. All right, so let's go to what happens when we shift. So we have a 90-degree rotation counterclockwise. So we're going 90 degrees and we're going counterclockwise. So that means that we are going to flip the X and Y and then obey the quadrant signs. So we kind of have to think a little bit about what that means. So let's start off with this first one. So negative 6, 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip the numbers. And then I want to obey those quadrant signs. So if I'm going from quadrant 2, remember they go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I'm rotating 90 degrees from quadrant 2, I'm going to end up in quadrant 3. So in this quadrant, all of my X values are going to be negative and all of my Y values are going to be negative. So that means that both of these numbers need to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this for all of these points. So I'm going to flip the X and Y and make sure they're both negative. So this is 4, 6, and they're both going to be negative. 4, 4, and they're both going to be negative. Flipping negative 4 and 5, so 5, 4, both negative. Flipping again, negative 3, negative 3. This is going to be negative 1, negative 4. And then the last one's going to be negative 2, negative 4. Alright, so my image is going to be the new image. This is the image after the transformation or translation, the change that we're doing. So let's graph all these points. So we've got a point at negative 2, negative 6. A point at negative 4, negative 6. So we're going to go negative 4, negative 6. Negative 4, negative 4. Negative 5, negative 4. Negative 3, negative 3. Negative 1, negative 4. And then the last point is at negative 2, negative 4. And again, you want to connect these in the order that they're in. So we're going to go from here to here, up, out to the side, and there you go. So I'm going to go ahead and use a piece of patty paper so you can just see that the rotation, how that works as we're learning. So there's my axis. So this is my original shape. So I'm going to hold the paper down at the point 0, 0, and I'm going to rotate 90 degrees. So when those axes line back up, it's going to be a 90-degree rotation. So you can kind of see how that lays right on top of that. And so that's our 90-degree rotation. So if you were to do 180 degree, you would end up shifted all the way over here into quadrant 4. If you started off here and you went a 90-degree clockwise rotation, clockwise means you'd end up over here. So you would end up right there. Okay, so again, this paper is up in the front if you need it. You're welcome to use it while you're still trying to get the hang of this. All right, let's look at another example. We're going to rotate this time 180 degrees. Whoop. Sorry. All right, so 180 degree rotation. So we are going to talk about what this means real quick. Well, actually, let's go ahead and just graph this, and then we'll talk about what the rotation is going to do. All right, so this time I'm going to do my pre-image or my original in this green color. So it's the same shape as what we did on the front. So we're going to go negative 6, 2. negative 6, 4, negative 4, 4, negative 4, 5, negative 3, 3, negative 4, 1, and then negative 4, 2. Again, connecting them in order. Alright, so rotating 180 degrees. So if we rotate 180 degrees, we know that each 90-degree rotation flips the X and Y. So if we started off with, we're just going to use generic X and Y. That's our original. We know that if we rotate 90 degrees, so if we do one 90-degree rotation, we know that our X and our Y's are going to flip. So if we do another 90-degree rotation, our X and our Y's are going to flip again. So when we do a 180-degree rotation, our X's and our Y's actually stay in the same place. All we have to do is just obey the signs of that quadrant. So with a 180-degree rotation, the X and Y stay in the same. We'll call it the same. And then we're just going to obey the quadrant sign. So if we go on this graph, remember this is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we rotate 180 degrees, that's two 90-degree rotations. So we're going to 90 degree, we know ends up down here because we just did it on the front. Another 90 degrees, we're going to end up over here. So we want to think about what the signs are in quadrant 4. So in this quadrant, our X values are going to be positive, but our Y values, any of these points in this quadrant, those Y values are going to be negative. So when we write out all of our new points, we need to obey these signs. The X and the Y are going to stay in the same place, coordinates, and then the signs will just be appropriate to that quadrant. So let's go ahead and write these out. So we're going to have a 6 and a 2. So 6 and a 2 in this quadrant would be 6 and 2. So that point would be positive 6, negative 2. So we're going to make that 2 a negative. And we're going to do this the whole way down. So we're going to leave our X's and our Y's the same, but then this Y coordinate has to be negative. So 4, negative 4. 4, negative 5. This is 3, negative 3. 4, negative 1. 4, negative 2. So we can go ahead and graph the new image, or the image after we've made some changes after the rotation. So 6, negative 2, 6, negative 4, 4, negative 4, 4, negative 5, 3, negative 3, 4, negative 1, and then 4, negative 2. And again, you want to connect the dots in this order so that the shape comes out looking correct. Alright, and there's our 180-degree rotation. Alright, let's go down to the next example. So our graph is here, but our questions are up here, so I'm going to kind of slide back and forth between the two. So example 3 says to draw a line from the origin, which is 0, 0, to the point D, and the same thing from the origin to D prime. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to draw a line in from the origin to D, and then from the origin to D prime. So I know that you guys aren't real familiar with on how to measure angles, but we want to figure out how many degrees the figure was rotated. So let's look at that. All right, so we're going to take this, and we're going to measure this angle. So we will have like a little hole in this, and so you are going to line up that hole. You want to put that little black line on top of this segment, and then this line you want to line up here. So you can see that is pointing directly at 90 degrees. So this figure has been rotated 90 degrees. That angle right in there is a 90-degree angle. So this is a 90-degree rotation. So ABC was rotated 90 degrees. All right, so we want to find the coordinates of the points on the image, pre-image ABCD, and the corresponding points on the image that's labeled, and label the points A prime, B prime, and C prime. So D prime has already been done for us. So let's go ahead and find out what our original points are. So the point A is at 7, 9. B is at 7, 1. C is at 4, 7, and then D is at 2, 7. All right, so for the A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime, we could go over here and figure out which one is which, or we know that the rule is that if we rotate 90 degrees, we're just flipping those X and Y coordinates and then obeying the sign. So in this quadrant, we know that all of the X values are negative and the Y values are positive. So if we flip these two, this is going to be a 9, 7, and we want to make sure that the X's are all negative. So this new point A prime is at negative 9, 7. So let's go look. Is it there? Negative 9 and then up to 7. So this is going to be A prime. Same thing for B prime. We want to flip the two coordinates because we rotated 90 degrees. And then we know that the X has to be negative because it's in quadrant 2. So B prime is at negative 1, 7. So negative 1, 7 is going to be this point right here. And then C prime, flip those X and Y's and then obey the sign. So our X coordinate is negative. So negative 7 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And then the last one is D prime. I mean, you could just figure it out, but we can just flip them. Negative 7 and 2. Negative 7 and 2. All right. So this is just asking kind of for a generic rule or an algebraic type of a rule. So we know that when we do a 90-degree rotation, we took all of these points, we flipped that X and Y, and then we obeyed the quadrant. So in our quadrant that we're in now, this first coordinate is negative. All right, so if we rotated this new image another 90 degrees, what is the sign of the X coordinate of the new image? So remember, the sign means they're talking about, is this coordinate going to be positive or negative? So if we look in quadrant 3, because if we did one more 90-degree rotation, this image would end up down here. In this quadrant, all of our X's are going to be negative. So the X coordinate is going to be negative. And then what about the Y coordinate? Well, let's go back to the graph and look. All of these Y values, any point in this coordinate, all of these Y values are going to be negative as well. And then it's asking, in what quadrant is the new image? Well, it's going to be in quadrant 3. Remember, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, oops, sorry, and this is 4. Alright, so example 6 says to draw and label A double prime, B double prime, C double prime, D double prime, the image of A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime after being rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise again. All right, so we're going to do another 90-degree rotation and list out our points and draw it on the graph. So I'm going to go ahead and do the work up here in a different color. So we're going to do the work up here. And so if we do another rotation of 90 degrees, and we're using these points, that means A double prime. Remember, we want to switch those X and Y's, so 7, 9, and then obey the quadrant signs. And we've already talked about that if we did this, if we rotated these points another 90 degrees, the X coordinate would be negative, the Y coordinate would be negative. So we're going to make them both negative. So for B prime, we're going to have -7, -1. For double prime, it's going to be -4, -7. And then for D double prime, it's going to be -2, -7. And then we can graph this. All right, so first point is going to be at -7, -9. So -7, -9. That's A. For B, it's at -7, -1. So -7, -1. That's B double prime. C is at -4, -7. And then the last one is D double prime is going to be -2, -7. And we're going to connect in order. A connects to B. B connects to C. To D, and then, bad placement for my letter, but there you go. So that is our image rotated again. Alright, so if X, Y is a point on our original image, this image right here that we started with, what is its image on A double prime, B, C, D double prime? So we took this and we went from here, we rotated 90, we rotated 90 again. So we flipped the X and Y and then flipped them back again. So you can see that the X's and the Y's are back in their original spots. And all we're doing now is just obeying that quadrant sign. So the X and the Y are going to stay in the same place. And then we're just obeying this quadrant sign. So in this quadrant, the X and the Y were both positive. In this quadrant, they're both negative. So we go ahead and put that on there like that. All right, good luck, guys.